It's 5:47, and it's time we had a confession to gather round. By the way, some people cross the road to say, what happens if I miss a confession, but I want to catch up? And I always say this.
Go to the Greatest Hits Radio app and you'll find Simon Mayo's Daily Confession podcast.
And
Very good.
And they go,
Yeah,
that's really useful, but why do you sound like Holly when you say that? Anyway, so that's what you can do. Anyway, today's confession and the winner of the first Smart Speaker of the Week is Casper. Father Simon and his loyal flock. My name is, let's just say, Casper. The reason for this name shall become clear as the story unfolds. This event took place in the very late 80s, when I was in my very early teens. As a family, we had acquired our first television, which came with a remote control. Up until that time, my siblings and I were the remote controls of the family, as I'm sure many of your listeners were subjected to this kind of labour also. Get up and change the channel. Now this is going back a long way, Holly. You might not understand the technology in this one. My parents, who were born in the late 40s, weren't quite sure what to make of this modern witchcraft, and therefore refused to use the television remote control. They would often make us get out of our seat to manually adjust the volume or change the channel. Thankfully, we only had the 2 channels, even though we had a perfectly good gadget to do this for us. Although this says it's the early 80s, it feels like the early 70s to me. But anyway, let's just go with what Casper says. One bitterly cold winter's morning, my older brother and I were sent home from school early as the heating had packed in. And in fact, the school regularly shut up shop in the winter as the school was too stingy to replace the old and ancient boiler. My parents were unemployed at the time, and so we expected them to be there to meet us when we arrived home. The house was empty of all living things. 5 minutes or so after arriving home, we saw our father approach the house. My older brother suggested we play a prank on him, and I was well up for that, as we didn't say back then. We lived in a bungalow, Father Simon, and had a direct line of sight into the living room from one of the bedrooms. We turned the volume on the TV up as high as it would go, and then switched the television off. We hid in the bedroom. As our father entered the house, he walked by the living room door. My brother turned on the television via the remote from the bedroom. Let me just say, I didn't know my father could jump so high or screech as loud as he did. At this point, he made a reference to the Almighty, the Almighty's Son, and also his mother and father. Anyway, he screamed, "What's happening?" When he finally came to his senses, he realised it was the television causing all the racket. He switched it off and stood staring at it blankly for a couple of minutes, trying to make sense of what had just happened. After about another 30 seconds or so, we switched it back on via the remote control. Only this time, I never knew that he could run so fast. He ran out of the door, down the street, praying to God Almighty as he ran. At this stage, we decided to visit some friends who also had the day off at school thanks to the unreliable boiler. After an hour or so, we said our goodbyes and headed home. As we approached the house, we noticed a car in our drive. My brother identified the car as belonging to the local parish priest.
Oh, no.
As we wondered why the priest had visited our house, he exited the house with our father closely behind. "Will it be okay now, Father?" he asked. The priest assured him everything would be fine now that he had blessed the bewitched TV remote control. My father told us that under no circumstances were we to turn that television on as it was possessed. What was the priest doing? I thought the priest had sorted that. Anyway, not until Sunday at the very earliest, as the priest told him. He would ask the congregation to say a prayer for the household. Now, we felt things had gone too far. We didn't think we could confess, really. After all, the clergy were now involved. So we stayed quiet about the whole prank. The priest stayed true to his word, as he did indeed ask his congregation to say a prayer for my father's possessed remote control. For countless weeks, some of my parents' friends would not come to visit as they too believed the story. Maybe it's 1962. I would like to seek forgiveness from my parents for it's a bit late for this, I think, for having to believe that their new TV was possessed, and also the priest for wasting his valuable time dealing with a possessed television when he could have been tending to more important matters like performing miracles and other godly chores. Please find it in your heart to forgive me. Your friendly ghost, Casper. I don't know and I'm not sure that Casper actually told his parents. I'm not sure that he did, to be perfectly honest. I'm intrigued. Anyway, I also think this wasn't the early 80s. Feel like the early 80s to you? I mean, I'm not looking at Holly because she doesn't remember.
I mean, were there that many tellies with remote controls in the early 70s? I don't
anyway.
think.
Who knows? Casper says it's the early 80s, so let's just say, anyway, he let his parents think that the remote control and the television were demonically possessed. Sister Holly will come down like a house of cards.
Yeah, I was unsure about this one, but no, I am actually not going to forgive this because he wasted everyone's time. He could have just said, oh, actually, look, it was me. I don't know, maybe I'm a really bad liar, so I would just come forward and just be like, yeah, actually, it was me with the TV remote. But, like, he didn't. All of this stuff, the priest turned up, possessed TV, it was rolling, it was spinning out of control. He could have just come forward and stopped all of that and made it all go away. That's why I don't forgive.
Brother from another gutter.
I mean, it was very funny. So I'm going to forgive. I mean, here's the thing. If the devil's coming back and he's going to possess your telly, and the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to turn the volume up very high, and I can probably deal with that. Also, not sure that the priest is qualified as a TV engineer, so I'm not taking his advice on when I can watch my telly. Yes, I'm going to forgive, because it was very funny.
You can't watch the television till Sunday. That's the advice from the priest. All right, okay. So maybe the people's verdict will have to decide this as ever. 61054. TV remote control in the early 80s, which they abused, and so the dad of the family thought the TV was possessed by the devil. Or maybe it was the remote control that was possessed. Anyway, there was certainly possession at work. Anyway, the priest came, performed the exorcism, and Casper thinks it's time to apologise. People's verdict is in. Here it comes.
So Ruth in Sutton says, Holly spoke a lot of truth in her verdict. They should have come forward and revealed what really happened. Not forgiven. Mandy says, forgiven. I'm listening on my smart speaker that I won for my confession and laughed out loud at tonight's. I love the fact that the speaker comes with a GHR sticker emblazoned on the top of it. Great show as ever.
Yes.
And Karen in Litchfield says, forgiven. It was the early 80s as my dad also bought a new TV with a remote. Okay. And so instead of telling us he pretended the TV was haunted by asking us to change the channel when we got close to the telly, he'd turn it over. Took about 3 minutes to suss him out. His laughter gave him away.
Okay, so clearly this kind of thing has been happening before, where people say, I have special powers. Look, I can change. Whoa. Anyway, if you have a confession, we would like to hear about it. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Thank you. And already looking forward to Secret Santana, which is going to be so different this year.
Oh, really? Is it? Completely new twist?
No. Speaking of new twist, though, I think this is quite an interesting confession. It's signed Holly Bobs.
Ooh.
Okay, which is a little bit close, but I don't think it's got anything to do with you.
No.
Though, obviously, Holly has an awful lot to confess.
Yeah.
Father Simon, Ultra Brother Matt, and Super Sister Holly. For these purposes, I think I should adopt the name Holly Bobs, as I am currently on holiday in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And this is already not forgiven. And this is a very much up-to-date confession. The deed happened yesterday, and I think I should seek a pardon before I return to the UK and get the burden off my conscience now. This is interesting. So if you're abroad and you send in a confession, if you don't get forgiven, you actually can't return.
Yeah.
That is actually being discussed as a change to the law. Anyway, I am a great animal lover, says Holly Bobs, and I'm missing my cat and dog so very much. Grown-up daughter on holiday with me does not quite cut the mustard. Of course I adore her, and to some extent, she too should be thinking of confessing, but it's the cat and the dog that I'm missing the most, and is at the heart of this pathetic story. For which not forgiven. Anyway, you see, we have made friends with some of the stray cats that hang around near the reception of our 5-star hotel. Oh. The main purpose of this confession is actually to just say we're having a great time. And from the very, very first day, I found myself thinking about what the poor kittens might like to eat from the huge buffet made available to guests at all hours of the day and night. I mean, nobody could possibly eat all that food, and surely some of the ham and chicken would not be missed. So, rolled up in a paper napkin, I ventured out and I fed the 3 little darlings I found on the route to my 5-star room. The following morning, the breakfast buffet was again overstocked. More meat rolled up into a napkin and smuggled out of the breakfast room. As we approached the kittens, we found them very interested in us again. And indeed, I understood a little, I think, of how the Pied Piper must have felt.
Nothing to do with cats.
No.
Or meat.
Word? No, it was something else altogether. Word must have got out on the feline grapevine because now we had a dozen or so to deal with. Is that a thing, the feline grapevine? We had to wait one lunchtime for a maintenance person to come and repair our dodgy safe. Right. Okay, a 5-star safe, is it? I think so. So when he knocked on the door, the 4 cats we had in our room were hastily hidden in the bathroom. I mean, so they're clearly taking these cats, not just feeding them, but actually taking them into the room. They were hastily hidden in the bathroom. I sat on the bed whilst my daughter sat on the balcony, 5-star balcony, waiting for the man to complete his repairs to our 5-star safe where all our valuables were. Meanwhile, a poor little meowing sound started, and I immediately faced my daughter and made frantic facial gestures and eye movements to indicate there was an issue in the bathroom. The workman had said nothing up to this stage, but he suddenly asked if I had cats in there. Of course not, I responded. I know that's against the rules, and we wouldn't want any trouble. Don't you hear cats crying, he asked in his lovely Caribbean accent, which you'll notice
Oh, that's a shame.
sounds disturbingly like my own voice.
I mean, come on.
I shouted to Jess, my daughter, "Can you hear cats, Jess?" "Oh, yes," she replied. "There's a little girl playing with some cats on the pathway just over there outside our room." The workman didn't look too convinced by this acting. Then I had a thought. The Greatest Hits radio app. Our 4 hours behind the UK time meant that I could tune in and hear you, Simon, you, Matt, and you, Holly, to help us out in this particular hole, nice and loud, so Jess could hear it out on the balcony. Thank you so much for assisting us in our little crime. You were playing some fine music and Matt was just telling us about another fine bunch of lads.
Yeah.
But the racket you were making helped disguise the noise that the cats were making. We're useful in so many different situations. As the workman packed up and bade us a good day in that lovely Caribbean accent of his, as you can tell,
Which is not.
we shut the door and rescued the poor little cats, who were overjoyed to see us again and received some more of the overabundant buffet food, and we also cleared up after them. We really do appreciate that animals should not be in the room, but that the rules state no domestic animals are allowed, and these kittens are not domesticated. We didn't even know their names. Surely that's okay. I feel as though you are, in a very real sense, my co-conspirators in this one, and that any judgment should be shared by you in the studio, because if I go down, then I'm going to take you down with me.
Right.
Echoes of Suella Braverman's resignation letter about this one. My guess is Holly might struggle under prison conditions. Matt would be fine. As for you... Father Simon, I think you might struggle to find any confessors in prison. Otherwise, they'd be out. Please consider my plea for forgiveness and make the correct decision, as all animal lovers would, including Matt. Well, this is very interesting, and bear in mind that hollybobs might not be allowed in the country if things go badly. Sister Holly.
Well, it's an interesting one. I think, what kind of 5-star establishment was this? That there was just stray cats hanging around outside and stray cats hanging around in the hallway? I'm not quite buying it was 5-star, I'm going to be honest. And so...
Not quite up to your standards.
It's not really up to my standards. Also, as much as I love the little kitties that you see when you're on holiday, in your room, I feel like that's a step too far, and that's why I'm not going to forgive this, because they shouldn't be in the room. You can see them outside. In the room, too far, too much.
Too much, okay, brother from another guy.
I mean, it's up to the cats where they go. Who are we to say that the cats can't go into certain places? Very much on the side of the cats. Also, I've no problem with giving them the stuff from the buffet, because the ham probably goes off overnight if you don't eat it. So leaving it out, may as well give it to the cats. I'm definitely going to forgive, just because you took our app clearly with you on holiday.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, almost wasn't going to forgive, because of course we needed the accent, the Caribbean accent, or else really that confession wouldn't have come to life.
No.
Definitely make sure we have an accent next time. But apart from that, yes, definitely forgiven.
It's the first time that we've been co-conspirators, I think. Entirely due to the fact that we joined in very loudly with some old racket that disguised the cats. Do you forgive Hollybobs, please? On the text 61054, first word is Simon. Forgiveness or no, it's the people's verdict that we need now. 61054, first word is Simon. Thank you very much. Well, it's 6 minutes after 6 o'clock. This is Greatest Hits Radio. More with our Tuesday epics in a moment. Just before the news, a confession from Hollybobs, who is still on her Hollybobs 5-star hotel in the Caribbean, and how she used the Greatest Hits Radio app to drown out the sound of wailing cats. I mean, so many things we can learn from this. And she'd been overfeeding them, and she shouldn't have had them in a bathroom at all. But anyway, we're apparently going down with her if she's going down. What do we say on the people's verdict?
They're roughly split between cat lovers and people who need to tell us that they've also stayed in 5-star hotels. For example, Adrian from Ross-on-Sea says, not forgiven. My wife Moya and I recently returned from St. Lucia, and our 5-star hotel was room service. No buffet in sight, so no cats. Josh in Lowestoft says, I totally forgive. I do agree with Holly. Cats shouldn't be in the hotel, but I think when they played GHR on the app, that made up for it. And Matt is also right. Where is the accent, Simon? You let us down a bit.
No, I didn't.
Lol. And finally, Pete from Sweden, from Swindon, in fact, not Sweden, says not forgiven.
It's easy to confuse.
It is so easy, isn't it? He says not forgiven for 2 reasons. Number 1, I don't like cats. Number 2, the next guests in that room will have a herd of cats meowing for food at all times of the day and night. What a nightmare.
You can get a train to Sweden from Paddington.
You can, and Swindon, yeah.
So if you have a confession, we'd love to hear it, please, and swap it for a smart speaker. If we actually use your confession, send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Thank you. It's 5:46, it's confession time. Gather round, another smart speaker to give away. Today's comes from Dick. Dick, thank you very much. We get quite a few Dicks who write in. Thank you very much for your confession. If you have one, it's confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Thank you very much. Father Simon, brother from another gutter, Sister Holly, and the all-knowing collective. Anyone who knows me would by the way, straight away, not forgiven.
Really?
For example, this is why.
Okay.
Anyone who knows me, says Dick, would confirm that I love a good practical joke.
Okay, yep.
Followed by, especially when they're played on my wife. So we have the measure of the man. So I take you back to 1991 when myself and my wife Yorkie living in a flat in South London. I was a taxi driver and worked nights, leaving Yorkie at home. This wasn't a problem as she would often spend a couple of hours in the evening sitting with my nan, who was our landlady and lived in the flat directly above us. She was a lovely old lady. That's Nan, not my wife, who would regale us with stories about the war and her time as part of the Women's Land Army. This explained her rather large forearms that would have given Popeye a run for his money. Anyway, I digress. One night, I kissed Yorkie goodbye and left for work. I locked the door securely behind me and watched from the side window as Yorkie went back into the kitchen at the end of the hall to wash the dishes before she settled down for the night. Little did she know what was about to take place. A short while later, she was at the sink, drying a large carving knife, which is never okay, when she saw the kitchen door move slightly. Well, Father Simon, her heart must have been beating so loud, even Nan would have been able to hear it over the Gladiator theme music that was blaring out of the scene. I imagine this is the TV series Gladiator.
Yes. Gladiator's ready, yeah.
Not taking her eyes off the door for a moment, she put the knife down and moved slowly across the kitchen, trying to see if anything was moving in the darkness through the small gap between the door and its frame. As she placed her hand firmly on the handle, a figure dressed in a black jacket and balaclava thrust forward. Yes, it's me! To my detriment, however, Yorkie didn't realise this at all. All she could see were a set of eyes peering at her through my chosen headwear. As she let out a high-pitched shriek, as you would, her fight-or-flight brain took over and she slammed the door as hard as she could, trapping what she thought was the intruder's head between the door and the frame. Bang! Down I went like the proverbial sack of spuds, and serve you right, may I say, falling backwards onto the metal-edged stairs, yes, serve you right again, that lead from the hall to the kitchen. As I landed, Yorkie leapt into the air, screeching like a mad woman and doing her best impression of a WWF wrestler. She landed on my crumpled torso.
Wow.
Thing is, if you walk out of a door dressed in black with a balaclava, what do you expect?
Yeah.
Hearing my muffled plea, Yorkie, stop, it's me, grown from the heap that had taken up a fetal position beneath her. She ripped the balaclava from the intruder's head to find her bewildered husband staring up at her in disbelief. She had trapped my head with such force she could clearly see the bruised indentations of both door and frame forming down both sides of my face. My suffering did not stop there. As Yorkie bent down to help me up, we saw a figure bounding through the front door. I can't quite describe the image that my Nan's silhouette made as she tried her best to run down our moonlit hallway, nightgown billowing, walking stick in her hand, shouting, "You leave her alone or you'll have me to deal with." I'm sure you get the picture.
Yeah.
When she discovered it was in fact her beloved grandson and not an intruder, she did eventually see the funny side, and she gave me a firm, but what she referred to as a loving whack with her walking stick. Unfortunately, as she was a bit wobbly and out of breath due to our 100-yard sprint, her aim was slightly off, and instead of hitting my shoulder, the stick caught me just above my eye, causing my brow to split and blood to cascade everywhere.
Oh dear.
As you can imagine, I didn't get to work that evening. Instead, we spent the night at A&E getting my eyes stitched. Sadly, Nan is no longer with us, but we can't help laugh. Well, maybe it's just Yorkie's laughing when we reminisce about how I got the scar that runs through my left eyebrow due to another one of my jolly practical jokes that went wrong. There's a message in here for practical jokes.
Clearly.
So, Father Simon, I asked for forgiveness, not from Yorkie, as she made sure I got everything I deserved. Now I ask forgiveness from Yorkie's knight, or should I say knighty in shining armour. My dear old Nan, she put age, fear and the need to put her teeth into one side to race as fast as she could to save my lovely wife from her prankster husband, resulting in her spending the rest of the night at A&E with us and missing her favourite TV show, which is, of course, Gladiators. As a penance, if my confession is to be heard, I would like to donate my smart speaker to a charity of your choice.
Oh.
Hopefully this might gain a few brownie points with Sister Holly, although a mug wouldn't go amiss.
Oh, right.
I humbly
No.
await your verdict. Well, are we set? Can you choose if you turn down the speaker? Can you opt for a mug? We'll have to discuss this at a higher level.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, really, I hate practical jokes.
Correct,
I
is the right
really
answer.
don't like them at all. Also, this could have ended so much worse. She was cleaning a carving knife, for
Yeah.
crying out loud. This could have ended way worse. Why on earth you would do that? I think, honestly, how is she still with Dick, frankly?
Yes.
Not impressed, didn't like it. And Nan had to do all that running and hit him with the walking stick. He deserved everything he got. Not forgiving at all.
Dick must have some
Ever.
other splendid qualities, do you think? really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's all ticking
Yeah.
still. Anyway, this is going to challenge you, I think.
It is somewhat. I've got to say, I agree. I agree with pretty much everything that Holly said.
However-
So, I mean, the carving knife. My instinct is, if she had still had hold of the carving knife, this would have been a whole different confession
It really would.
that would not have gone on the air. Really? I mean, yes. I suppose we did all see the funny side, didn't we? At the end of the,
Struggling
we did see the funny side
Struggling.
at the end of the day.
Struggling.
And I mean, at least Dick has had the self-awareness to do the confession, because he's realised he comes out badly in his confession, and there he is burying himself for us all to have a go. No, whoever hasn't done that, cast the first stone. Quite
so
right, Dick.
therefore-
Therefore, going to forgive.
Wow. Even
Yeah.
though you don't believe a single
No,
word.
Not a word of it.
What you just said.
No.
So, does Dick get your forgiveness? It's the people's verdict. We would like to know, please. You can get in touch, 61054. Confession from Dick, who was a bit of a practical joker. He surprised his wife. It's in the dark. He's dressed in black, including a balaclava. And then his wife attacks him, as you would, really. Does him some mischief, as does his grandma. And they end up in A&E. Anyway, forgiveness or not, here's the people's verdict.
Overwhelmingly not. Albert in Croydon says no forgiveness. It's lucky for him she didn't have the carving knife.
Yes.
He got everything he asked for. Dick is an idiot. Not forgiven. Absolutely not, in full cap, says Violet from Corby. Dick is just an attention seeker. But Mitchell says forgiven. I once did a similar prank on my brother Tom, and it was absolutely hilarious.
I really don't think it was. Anyway, if you have a confession, we'd love to hear it. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. We have some serious business to attend to, and I have just noticed at the end of the email, it says, Simon, if you use this, could you let me know ahead of time, because I've waited 56 years to share this story. So, sorry about that, Kay.
Because we haven't.
To be honest, if people say that, it very rarely happens.
No, sorry.
We don't know. Anyway.
So it's Kay.
It's from Kay, Kay. Simon Coe, from an early age, I have to tell you, and I have to confess, I have always enjoyed reading and writing stories. I think it began with my love for Enid Blyton, The Secret Seven, The Famous Five, Mallory Towers, and so many more. Sadly, I didn't have the same passion for maths. In junior school, our maths teacher, an ex-military man, Mr. Quick, terrified me. He would point with his stick and ask a question. In all probability, the question wouldn't be difficult. However, to someone who wasn't very confident and would go a deep colour of crimson if I got the answer wrong, the lessons filled me with dread. I would go to bed at night reciting my times tables so I could be ready for the stick-pointing thing. I discovered that my friend Stacey didn't much enjoy maths either. She, like me, also enjoyed Enid Blyton reading. We would write stories about ourselves and imaginary escapades, all harmless fun, which buoyed our beliefs that we were marvellous writers, and decided that our school needed to have a story writing competition.
Oh.
So this is the tale of the great story writing competition of 1967, which is still talked about to this day. We set out the rules. 1, all the pupils in all of the years would take part. 2, the stories could be about anything. 3, prizes would be given, first, second and third prizes for all years. And also we would cut out the middleman and launch the competition without first seeking permission. Brave, bold decisions for 2 pretty timid 8-year-olds. So one day after morning break, instead of reporting for our maths lesson, we would go to the toilets, let everyone else settle into their respective classrooms, then set about our task. We started off with Class 1-1. These are very unimaginative class names, by the way, because the next one is Class 1-2.
Okay.
The main reason being it was furthest away from the headmaster's office and a good distance away from Mr. Quick's maths lesson. Plus, the teacher in that class wasn't scary. So we tapped on the door and we entered. We informed the teacher that we were looking for people to take part in an amazing story writing competition. She listened with interest and then asked us to present the details to the class. Well, it turned out, Father Simon, we were naturals at presentation and blagging. And so we moved on to Class 1-2, 1-3 and 1-4. More imagination needed, I think, there. The following week, we did the rollout for Year 2, and then Year 3, and then finally Year 4. Now, there are many flaws in our plan. It wasn't authorised, point number 1. Also, the pupils in our double maths lesson missed out because we couldn't present it to Mr. Quick's class. He'd never buy it. Every plan has its problems. We managed to resolve the prize situation. We decided that if we pooled our pocket money, then we might be able to buy some things. Obviously, after we'd bought our own comics and sweets, because we had to go first. The remainder of the prizes were going to have to be toys and books that our younger siblings no longer needed.
Oh, yes. Very good.
Of course, adult or sibling consent would not be sought.
No.
Also, a mathematical brain could have worked out that the classes in those days were large, up to 40 pupils a class. So a possible 640 stories to collect, and even more daunting for us to read. However, we ploughed on. At first, it was interesting to read the stories. Then it became a bit of a bind. It was stopping us from writing our own stories. We were inundated. We had to bring bigger satchels and duffel bags in with us on story collection day. And then we had a problem of where to put them when we got home. We were a good 3 months into the competition.
Oh, my word.
And Mr. Quick became suspicious that we weren't present for the double maths lessons and we were behind in our single maths lessons. Being a maths teacher, it didn't take him long to put 2 and 2 together. Although it did take him 4 months. We were called to the headmaster's office and after a full confession were given a real dressing down. However, worse was to come. When we eventually re-attended double maths, Mr. Quick was ready and waiting. The first half a dozen pointy stick questions were put to Stacey and me. When we couldn't answer them, he came over to our desks, leant forwards into our faces, and went off on a blood pressure-induced rant which culminated in him threatening to come down on us like a ton of bricks if we ever chose to miss the lessons again. I've never seen anyone so cross. It was very scary, and despite not having been in attendance when he was teaching imperial weights and measures, we guessed at that young age that a ton could be pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So our cards were marked for the rest of our stay in junior school. I have had a fear of maths ever since. I even went on to fail my maths exam, and we all know whose fault that was. As for the competition, all stories were binned and no prizes were given out.
Oh, right.
640. Oh, however many it was. The one amazing thing was that the school did not inform our parents. It was over 50 years later that I told my mum.
Wow.
She shook her head and she said, I never knew what you were up to with Stacey. Anyway, Simon, I don't seek forgiveness for Mr. Quick and his swagger stick. He should never have been allowed to become a teacher in a junior school. But I do seek forgiveness for Stacey and myself for failing to execute our plan properly, and in doing so letting down not only our maths classmates who knew nothing of the competition, but letting down the entire school who slaved for hours writing hundreds and hundreds of stories which we just chucked away. In our defence, I will say that at such a young age we had been clearly influenced by Enid Blyton, so maybe it's her fault.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
By the way,
Blame her.
the school has not been mentioned, as I feel there may be still some bitterness and resentment from those who took the time and trouble to write stories, but with no reward. I mean, that's forgive and forget. Move on after let's say half a century. Simon, should you read this out? I've waited 56 years. Please tell me in advance. Sorry, Kay.
Yeah.
Didn't do that. Anyway, Sister Holly is going first. What do you say to Kay?
Yeah. Oh, it's a funny one. I think the thing that I feel really sad about is the children who spent all that time and all that energy writing all these wonderful stories, which I'm sure ended with, and it was all a dream, as we all did. Yes.
Yeah.
But, I think they would have been really fantastic. They couldn't be bothered. They kind of half started something and then couldn't be bothered to just pull it through and just keep going. And for that, I'm not going to forgive.
I imagine they had 640 stories because of their competition.
Yeah. Like, all those children, all of that time, all of that energy,
you'd chuck
throw
it
in the bin.
Well, you would throw them away. I can't be bothered with this.
Yes.
Brother.
I mean, this does raise a few ethical issues, not least, judging and entering your own competition. Who's going to be judging yours? Exactly. Oh, right. Turns out it's you. I mean, at least they showed initiative, though, didn't they? They want to get out of maths. Not everyone has to be great at maths, Mr. Quick. Turns out they weren't. And they just, showed a bit of initiative and went around the other classes. So good for them. And there were no prizes. And frankly, when you're at school, you have to write stories all the time, and there's never a prize then, is there? So nobody lost out. And frankly, if Mr. Quick can't put 2 and 2 together, what's he doing teaching maths?
Well, he did
there
after 3 months.
Well, take you too long. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
So to the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Kay, yes or no, after 56 years? 61054 on the text. First word is Simon. 61054. First word is Simon for the people's verdict. We heard from Kay, a school competition from 1967, a school writing competition. It was arranged unofficially, therefore illegal, and 640 entries. They hadn't quite realised how popular it would be, so they just chucked them all away. Anyway, and they got into trouble, but she didn't tell her mum for 50 years. That's essentially where we are. The people's verdict is in. Here we go.
Not forgiven, says Peter. Can't believe she threw all those stories in the bin. There were hundreds. Perhaps she should have gotten some friends to help her out. Tommy in Newquay, though, says, forgiven. When we're young, we all have big ideas about putting on competitions or fun fairs that we never actually put on. I'm really impressed by Kay and Stacey's efforts. And finally, Rachel is in two minds. Kay and her friend are not forgiven for letting all those other children down after they'd worked so hard. Maybe there'll be people listening tonight who finally found out the fate of their stories. However, I'm a maths teacher and I completely forgive them for skiving.
There you go. Your confession, please, to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.